Good.
So now, I guess Jeremiah does have some stuff to present, and then we can just do open discussion after that. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for Ron. We may have a few for Benjamin if he's still, I believe he's still with us. But Jeremiah, do you want to do kind of a quick update?
This will take me about maybe 3 minutes. It'll probably take me longer to pick which desktop I want to share. Try that. I hope that I am sharing a picture of a bunch of powders and bags.
This won't get us arrested, will it?
No, because luckily what we're looking at here is pine rosin, carnauba wax, chitosan powder, and some tungsten carbide powder. Okay. But I mean, maybe it won't get us arrested right now because it hasn't been discovered yet, so it's not yet illegal. But give it time, and you never know.
No, so, I'm just teasing. It actually looks more like.
Oh, you never know though. But so these are some of the stuff that we were working with to make electrets, and the chitosan powder is a highly chiral molecule, which is one of the things that we were working with, not just to add to electrets using wax, but electrets that were made with chitosan powder and acid and graphene. So I just wanted Ron to be able to see, you know, some of the stuff that we were working with. We did a lot of different samples and tests, a lot of different variations of formulations to try to figure out what actually held together and if it could take a charge or if it would crack itself. And so here are some of those variations, like we have, you know, 100% carnauba and 50-50 mix and 5-to-1 mixes and stuff, just to try to get it stable. And so speaking of the chiral molecules, it's not just, you know, Grabenikov's insects that offer that kind of stuff. I was looking at things like, you know, we had some Korean food and it came with mussels. So these shells are made of chitosan, which could be ground up and used because it's chiral molecule. And when making electrets, here's one of the setups, really crude setup that we used, you know, just with a 100 kV positive source and electrode going down into there. That's variable tamper, so we can adjust the height. And you know, we did it inside of cups too. Ultimately, what we found out is that when making electrets, the one piece of advice I would want to add is if anybody's trying to do this yourself, and especially following Ron's presentation and all that amazing advice he gave, you need to keep this material hot for a while. In all of these cases that you're looking at in these pictures, this material cooled down right away because it was it's just not insulated. So you need to keep it warm enough so that you can get electrons out of it or electrons into it. Otherwise, effectively, you're going to end up with material that's not really polarized. So then last time I did an update on some experiments that I wanted to run. I wanted to run the Frolov experiment. And so I built one of these things. And in order to test it, I had tested it 2 different ways. The first one is I stuck this device powered up at 25,000 volts on the scale at about 5 inches away from the scale and from the surface of the countertop and tested it that way. And I did get a positive measurement. So I built the suspension stand. I'll just shoot back down to the stand here real quick. So this, I don't know why this is previewing in a tiny little view here. That's just, whatever the case is. Yeah, so I built this this stand that raises it up off the scale and checks it again, and we don't get any force when it's well away from the scale. So this is again telling us that we have extremely small forces, if any, exist at all with the Frolov device at 25 kV. So if these forces exist, they are incredibly small. We will need a torsion balance or something that's capable of indicating 1/1000th of a gram, perhaps, in order to get the kind of indications. We also tested Nasika's wavy capacitor recently. He claims in the patent that pure DC will be significant enough to cause a 4-something grams per cube or per square centimeter force on a material that has a 2 millimeter by 1 millimeter grid like this. So I built one of these things. Here's the cell, and close the cell up. It's supposed to be in a 0 potential casing, so that's what this looks like. And I tested it again, and at DC, I can tell you for sure Nasika's in his calculations, I think he used finite theory. So they don't prove out DC. This device does nothing obvious or measurable within the 0.01 gram range or above. That was the resolution of my scale. So these we can rule out right away. Just if they work, they don't work with pure DC and they don't work at the voltages that we predicted. We also tested the spherical electrode device of Tor, and that device does swing on the pendulum just slightly, and it is an incredibly small swing at 80,000 volts negative charge input to the internal sphere. But that is something that we want to put on a torsion pendulum as well, because again, that force is so incredibly small that it could be influenced from a number of things. And then in terms of future power supplies, we just needed better power control. So I was throwing this thing together. This is a super miniaturized power supply. And unfortunately, the picture is also super miniaturized. I don't, again, know why it's so damn small, but it's only 3 centimeters across by 3 centimeters. It will do 160,000 volts with a peak of 180,000 volts. So this is in my new series of ultra compact high voltage power supplies that would be basically microsat ready if any of this technology works. And so I figure if we're going to go that way someday, we might as well start working towards that now and making this stuff super compact and as light as possible, so that if any of it does work, we can get it into implementation as fast as possible. And so that's the updates from the Milwaukee lab. I don't know if Mark has anything to share. I'll go ahead and stop sharing screen now.
Well, thank you, Jeremiah. Mark, do you have anything, sir?
Not really. What happened was we were, I was going to start working on the Falcon experiment you guys have heard so much about, and designed the plastics, and we ordered the ASA plastic for the chamber and all that, and then the 3D printer died. So we have a new printer on order that's supposed to give us 10 micron precision, which is amazing. I'm super excited to work with this 3D printer, and so is Jeremiah. He's going to take the old one and learn the works of 3D printing, because that is kind of important for this kind of stuff. And we hope to have that sometime next week, and we'll be able to take our experiments to the next level. So
awesome. Well, thank you. Well, so let me see. Should we go to open discussion now? Now that we did Jeremiah's update, I think we're just about there, right?
Yep, let's go.
Okay, let's do it. So the way it's set up now, the way with open discussion is this is really kind of the topics that matter to you guys. I guess I would mention to everybody who's listening, go ahead and unmute yourselves to talk, but you know, try and be respectful of others who are talking, and then try to mute the mic when you're not talking, right? That way we don't get a lot of feedback. So if you have questions for Ron or for Benjamin Solomon, who's still here, those would be great.
Hi, this is Bill, the Gravity Alchemist. I wanted to talk a little bit about some human interest stuff. I live in New Mexico. We have the spaceport here in New Mexico. Like I said, I've been trying to get maybe some funding from the government, which seems like it's really pretty easy. But one of the things I don't know if you guys heard about is spin launch. They just started building spin launch at our spaceport in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And is what spin launch is a centrifugal force device that they spin. It takes them about an hour or so to spin a missile. They spin this rocket, and when they release it, it goes through the atmosphere at about 5,000 miles an hour, up pretty high. And when it gets to a certain height, then it fires up its rockets to go ahead and try to reach escape velocity. Supposedly that's going to save a lot of money to launch satellites into space, but you know, it takes about an hour or so. I read the information on it to spin this thing up, and then when they release it, I was wondering, you know, when they release it, it's not symmetrical anymore on those 2 points of balancing momentum objects, the rocket and whatever the counterweight is. So I'm wondering, you know, what they do with it when it goes out of balance. But anyway, just for a little plug for me, that what I'm working on is sort of like spin launch, but it uses it in a very narrow band. It's like I spin something, and then it spins again, and then it spins again. It kind of inches its way up into space. I don't know if it would ever reach escape velocity. I don't know if it will do that, but it's what I'm working on. It's just based on Einstein's ideas about equivalence principle and accelerations, that gravity and acceleration is the same. They're both pseudo forces in the sense that if you have something going around in a circle like at spin launch, Einstein says that that's a pseudo force. Centrifugal force is center fleeing, and of course centripetal force is center seeking. So I won't go too much further with this, but I just came up with the idea that I could use one pseudo force against another and figure out a way to spin something up, tumble it up into space. That's what I'm working on. So I thought I'd just throw that out there. And I got, it's sort of like a treasure hunt at my website. I'm putting hints in there on what I'm working on. It's like, I don't want to just blab out what I'm working on, but I don't have really anybody that's real interested in it yet. I've got a few people here in Roswell.
No, Bill, I'm not sure if you've seen him or not, but what you're describing sounds a little bit like what Mike Gamble was working on. Did you see our presentations of Mike Gamble? And he was on with Tom Vallone, and Tom Vallone is going to be presenting again as well in the future. Great.
Well, yeah, I know. I saw some guys even from Albuquerque that you guys interviewed, and then I loved Jeremy's interview with Brian Keating. I follow Brian Keating and Lex Friedman. Those guys, it's a lot of fun. Watch Veritasium.
So you're following Jeremy Rees' channel too, and he's doing stuff all week long, right? So yeah, I would. That's the youtube.com/alien scientist, I think.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I really liked his interview. So I'm just giving a shout out to you guys. Like I said, I just came across you, and I've been way out here in the Tules in Roswell. There's not much going on really out here, so I'm trying to stir some stuff up.
Well, depending on how this UAP stuff is going, you guys may have some interesting. I mean, you're already getting the tourist traffic, right? So you may just get that much more.
Well, I'm sure interested in talking with Mike and hear what he had to say about it. It's similar, because I don't have it all worked out. It's like if you had passengers on this thing, they'd be sick and busy. But it has the possibility of doing a escape. In other words, you can launch it from the ground and escape. It would be significant, and it doesn't use propellant. Use electricity.
Yeah, and something like that. It sounds like you could use it for cargo, right? And and they've looked at a bunch of different ideas that would be cargo ready. Because the G forces are too high for people or whatever. So,
right.
Well, let me see. Jeremy Rees. We actually have alien scientist with us here. He's hiding. There we go. Did you want to talk about UAPs, sir?
Yeah, I guess we could touch on that now that we're at the end here and stuff. I did want to put together a kind of a summary report for the Senate Select Intelligence Committee that's doing they have a task force that's putting together this report on UAP phenomena for the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. And they're going on, I guess, a lot of the information they're getting from like the Pentagon and other sources within the intelligence community and stuff. And I just felt like we could put together a summary report of just the stuff that we've gone over in this group here and the things that we've learned through our discussions on here. And through the patent search and other stuff, I feel like we could put together a very interesting summary of, at least informing, our senators and congressmen and people in the government of a lot more of the scientific research that's been done into anti-gravity and also propulsion technologies over the past 70 years, and some of the things that have maybe been developed with taxpayer money that many of us are still not completely aware of. So that's kind of where I'm going with that, and putting together a report on what we know about some of the stuff and the capabilities that have existed, and then going back over all this knowledge, and then showing cases that we know of back in the 50s, the Denmark, such as like the 1952 September 1952 Denmark UFO case, where metal was dropped, metal was recovered. It was ended up in the hands of the U.S. Military, and it went somewhere. And tracing down, where unknown metals of unknown origin go to within the military, because there was projects like Project Moondust that did engage in recovering foreign artifacts, like, you know, they claim like Russian or Chinese satellite technology and stuff. But this would have been one of the organizations where this this type of activities would have fallen under, if you know what I mean. So I wanted to put together a sort of summary on where we kind of have tracked down those materials to, that being Wright-Patterson and Battelle being one of the main contractors that did a lot of the metallurgy studies, apparently, and how that those organizations are private institutions which are unreachable by FOIA. So it's really difficult for the archivists and the documentation to get a lot of the documentation on this stuff if it exists. So and because we need to push for transparency going forward in the future. If there were recovered, we have evidence of recovered metals from UFOs, like I mentioned in that Denmark UFO case, where there's actual a chain of custody of this material leading up to it going to the military, and that I'm sure that's not the only case. These metals are interesting because they show you know, effects that show maybe evidence of supercavitation and stuff like that, where there might be some type of entanglement or a metallurgical phenomenon going on, similar to cold fusion or what other people have described as, you know, exotic vacuum objects, aka like the Hutchins effect, or other explanations for you know, these observed phenomenons in metals. So I think that there's a lot of detailed information that we could sort of put together that could quickly, you know, brief these people on just a load of information that exists that they're probably not aware of, because they don't, you know, it's just not out there. It's just not typically talked about or really well known. But it's all backed up with documentation. I think we could put together quite a report with the information that we have.
Do you have any contacts at the Pentagon who will read the report? Have you started on it yet?
I don't have any contacts at the Pentagon. I don't think that this is not the Pentagon's issue. This is the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, and I can reach out to my local senator who sits on that committee here in Rhode Island, which is Senator Jack Reed. And I encourage other people to look up their senators, for the local senators, and call. You can actually call your local. There's a number you can call for your local senator, and this is how you reach out to your local government and get them interested in this. And I think there's already a campaign that's been started by another channel. It's called The Big Phone Home. I guess, what's this guy's name? Lewis. I want to plug my buddy's channel. So The Big Phone Home. If you look this up, The Big Phone Home.
So this is something that you just contacting your local
Senate. Yeah, we're calling our local senators and contacting your local senators and just informing them. And what I want to do is put together with our database crew and some of our other guys in here in this group, is put together a sort of summary report of some documents. You know, I want that 1952 Denmark case study with the metal in there. I want a couple other declassified studies that we can put together in this package to send off to the senators, and the more people that we get doing this, I think that this is the way we can get this message out.
What is the purpose of doing such something?
The purpose is to get a government more aware and interested in that this is going on, that there needs to be more attention drawn to it, and also maybe hopefully we'll get the media to pick this up as well, because they seem to be covering a lot of UAP stuff, but it seems to be focused around, you know, Lou Elizondo, and this core group of TTSA and Pentagon people have been like the focus of that. And there's a lot of you know, concern and cautious on what you know what these people, these counterintelligence people are doing within, you know, they come out of you know, people like us who have been doing this for 16 years, and then, you know, a group like TTSA that comes out of the woodwork and instantly gets in the New York Times and gets millions and millions of followers and viewers. It's just it's kind of like, what's going on here? And they're not talking. They promised all the science and that they were going to build spacecraft and all this stuff, and then they haven't talked anything about science or brought any scientists on to really break down any of this stuff.
I got some stock.
from them. I bought
Yeah,
some
I know.
stock, but I did it because my hobby's suing the government, and I always learned a long time ago, if you got to have what's called standing, you got to have an actual injury in fact. So that means if you sue the government, that means if they charge you a fine or say you got to pay something, you pay all of it up front, and you just say, okay, I'm going to sue you.
Yeah.
And then if you win, they have to give it all back. So, you know, that's how our courts work.
Yeah.
Just don't
That's
be
a
in a
good
hurry.
point. That's a good point. I like that. Thank you.
Oh, so you bought stock just to be able to get that loss protection?
You can buy insurance. Yeah, seriously.
This is part of the reason why Hover Brothers gave back all the money that we raised for that, because I didn't want to get sued either. So it was a smart move.
The question you have to ask is, what are you going to achieve out of this? That given that there's the Academy to the Stars that are very well connected and they haven't achieved much.
They're falling apart, actually. Lou Elizondo and the other top.
Steve Justice
Yeah,
left.
Steve Justice, and there was another guy that was up there. They just left because there was too much concentration on the media. Like, they were spending all their money making these TV shows and beating to death the Nimitz encounter, and nothing was being spent on actual research. And that's not where Lou wanted to go with it. So now he's pretty much a free agent floating around looking for the next best thing in anti-gravity.
Well,
I heard that
it-
Steve Justice joined Virgin Galactic. He's working for Branson's company now.
Guys, if I could jump in real quick, one of the things that one of the reasons I asked Jeremy about the UAP thing was some of the stuff you chatted, but also, so I had just seen an article here, and in fact, I'll share my screen here really quick, and hopefully you guys can see this one. Okay, so this one just came through. This former intelligence chief, quite a few more UFOs detected than the public knows. Now, I did an interview with Thor from UAP Theory, and he had talked about gravitational lensing in a Puerto Rico sighting, and that was a Homeland Security sighting in Puerto Rico in 2013. Most folks aren't aware of that one, but this article, and this was forwarded to me on Jack Sarfati's list. So this is yesterday. This came out. That's John Ratcliffe, who served as the National Director of National Intelligence, right? So the same people are doing this report. He's saying there are a lot more sightings that have been made public. And let me see, when we talk about sightings, we're talking about objects that have been seen by Navy or Air Force pilots, satellite imagery, movements that are hard to replicate. We don't have the technology for. He had also said in there, usually we have multiple sensors that are picking up these things. So, you know, for what it's worth, that was kind of why I mentioned this, because it seems like, and you know, and Lord knows I'm no expert on this, but it seems like this is kind of building towards a crescendo. You know, the Navy UAP thing was, I think that it's been growing instead of going away. So let me figure out.
Let's say it's basically an attempt to get more money from the budget to do other kinds of research. That could be one of the objectives of why this is making the media.
Benjamin, we can't hear you.
Oh, he's suggesting that it could be a financial tool to get more funding for different government groups, which very well could be the case.
So when you want to do something like this, you have to figure out what's the motivation behind, what's the context behind the context. About 10 years back, I talked to one very, very, very senior executive at Lockheed, and he said, it's an email. He said, but I have to go figure out, because my PC crashed several times, so I have to go figure out where that email is. He said, we know gravity modification is real, but we do not know how it works. And then about 5 years ago, 2015, I received, within a short period, within about 6 months period, I received 5 emails from Chinese professors. One was stationed at the Max Planck Institute when he sent me the email. They all wanted to understudy under me. What? Why do you want to understudy me under me? I don't even have a PhD in physics. Why do you want to understand under me? So that angle may be that there are other terrestrial organizations that want to leapfrog the US in this kind of work. And I talked to a different guy in Lockheed, and he said, don't you dare. You will be a pariah in this country if you bring those Chinese professors here.
Well, I don't know. I think part of the thing is they want you to be afraid, and
I'm not afraid.
well, that's why they're gonna make you a pariah. I kind of feel like suing the government makes you a pariah,
Well, I think,
but it's actually more rewarding.
No, the point is you have to take a slightly different slant. If you want the US government to get off its butt and do something about this kind of observations and this kind of technologies, you have to take a different angle, not the angle that towards the stars have taken.
Well, I'm pretty skeptical of the extraterrestrial origin theories of what we're observing. I think it's more likely that it's of terrestrial origin in humans, and it's a technology that perhaps I'm more likely to believe that there's subterranean people or something like that than I am that it's extraterrestrial. I think humans seem to be a little arrogant, think they're at the top of the food chain, but you know, if we've only been around for a couple million years, that's a tenuous position to be in. So I think that there's lots of stuff we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about our own oceans.
I've heard several people mention the idea, and nobody's been super serious about it, of time travel. And the thing that interests me about that is it seems like that's just in the last year and a half that I've started to hear that. Before that, whenever someone talked about a UFO, it was always little green men, little gray men. And just in the last year, I've started to hear people say, you know, the context is usually, well, something's going on. Maybe it's aliens or maybe it's time travelers. And I thought,
yeah, and I think I like that theory too. I think it's a good possibility that time travel is possible. And I base that on my own personal experience with gravity-magnetism. I've showed you guys some of the data, but basically gravity can be faster than the speed of light, and it can be slower too. It's only light is stuck at that speed. And once you realize that, you know, gravity is a property of protons and not electrons, and light is a property of electrons.
I agree with you there.
Then you understand that gravity is, so my background was in semiconductor physics. And when I was in my 20s, I was doing these Hall effect measurements on these exotic semiconductors they were using to make infrared detectors. And that's when I found out that so-called holes, or protons as they're called, holes are called protons, or I mean, I got it backwards. Protons are called holes in the semiconductor, and they're a mobile charge. And so protons move, or else your cell phone wouldn't work. So it's just that the properties of protons is different from electrons. Electrons can move really fast in a semiconductor, but protons are slower because they're more massive. They have more mass. But now protons can be free. They can move in and they can be superconducting too. I mean, but they move as what's called a lattice vacancy. And they move like at the speed of hypersound. They don't move at the speed of light. And so it's a different property. It's got different timing is the best way to. Protons exist in a different space-time than electrons. That's the best way to describe it. And if you go into the past, you get into denser space-time. As you go into the future, space-time is less dense. That's why in the future, it's a big void. In the past, it's Big Bang or whatever you want to call it, or a jet in a black hole, like I call it. So, I mean, that's basically what I think's going on is we just don't, we're stuck on Einstein's love of electrons and the photovoltaic effect.
You know, Michael, if I could jump in real quick. So Robert, let me see, Robert from Tachyon Aerospace is starting to build in 6 weeks now. Sorry, that somebody's messaging me and it jumped up. He has 2 short videos. He was wondering if he could screen share. You guys okay with that? Robert, do you want to screen share?
Yeah.
There we go. And can you turn your video on too, sir?
Yeah, well,
I know it's getting late your time. In fact, it's like midnight your time, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I'm used to the late nights. There we go. Oh.
Pleasure to see you again, sir.
Right, let me just see if I can do this. Minimize that a bit. Share screen. So is that desktop? Right, has my desktop come on?
Not yet. No.
When you clicked share screen and that box came up, did you click on one of those pictures in that box?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, give me a minute and I need to go into my settings and make changes to allow Zoom, because at the minute it's not allowed. Because when I click,
you know, it should be allowed. What it's saying is who can share. I'm checking it on my end. Who can share? All participants can share.
it might be the settings on my Mac, because I have it set up pretty tight on security.
Oh, it might be. Okay, yeah.
So I'll just disappear again for a minute, and I'll.
If you want to paste links in, if you have links to those, I can play them on mine.
I can try. Let me see if I can drop you the link straight into the. Let's have a look at.
Yeah, so in the meantime, you'd mentioned a chat. You guys are actually starting to build on Malta. So is that a facility you're building then, a research lab, or?
No, we have a facility out there. It's the old film studios. It's like the biggest building on the island, actually. But we have a section of it at the back that we're going to start working. I've got a video where, which is one video, is an actual video of technology that we built, which a number of people might be interested in, especially John and Solomon, Benjamin Solomon, and Jeremiah and Mark. So I shared the video with Mark. Me and Mark spoke briefly on Skype, but once it's what we call we call it a gravity assist drive, and we've probably put a couple of million of investment into the technology and what we've been building. So we have a video of one of the first machines that we built in a garage, where we say all the great stuff comes out of the garden shed. So we've got a video of that, and we have a video of what we're building, which is what we call the TAF-1, our flight system. And we're hooked up with a number of different people around the world and different investors to put all this together. So we're literally going to be out there 6 weeks' time And
Yeah, you know, if you have links that you can paste in, I'm happy to try and play them here. I'm a little distracted by Mark's, and Mark, I don't want to alarm you, but your couch is glowing. I just noticed that. I said, should I say something? No, I don't know. That might not be polite, but
Look at that.
yes, it is definitely glowing.
Yeah, we got some UV light going on in the background.
I would, yes. So I would walk slowly away. Don't run. You don't want to alarm, you know, you don't want to let anything know. Just slowly walk away from it.
I can make it infrared too.
Actually, I looked at doing that in our house, but my wife said no. So,
Well, good thing for me, I don't have one anymore.
yeah, I like your puppy too. Look at that. She's crashing out for the day, isn't she?
Yeah, pinky in the brain.
Yeah.
Jeremiah is not liking that at all. He's covering his eyes. Yeah.
I'm surprised she's just so quiet. So now I'm fixating on your dog now. She just passed out.
Good. The whole time.
There you go.
Alert from system preferences.
Same. I have to quit and then come back into the conference to enable the app to allow me to share screen. So I'll quit, do this, and then I'll come
Sure.
back.
Yeah. Well, and in the meantime,
Lovely, nice automated voice in there too. Yeah, go ahead, please. We can't wait to see those videos. I'm really excited about that.
those automated voices are interesting, aren't they? I remember when my first iPhone and I got Siri and I was all excited about it. You know, the only thing I use Siri for now is a cooking timer. That's it.
Well, it looks like we got something.
This is, I think this is Jeremiah's screen, right? No, this is Robert's screen.
Yeah, Robert.
Oh,
Your screen is showing, so be careful not to show anything you don't want shown. So.
yeah. Robert, you're actually, your screen is.
Let's do this. Robert, is that your boat?
Oh, he's muted, but I can ask him to unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that, guys.
No, no worries. Looks like it worked. Looks like it worked fine. So yeah, we can see your screen.
Right. So first video. This is the gravity assist drive we built. This is based around what we call bipolar magnetic fields, but bipolar is probably a bad choice of words now. But we were developing this technology for 25, 30 years. So we haven't really come up.
Still just seeing the boat, Robert. Sorry to interrupt.
We see it now.
Robert, can you describe what's going on here a little bit more?
Oh, looks like you're getting too close to that thing.
I'll set the sound off. Right. What what we done with this machine was we've got it hooked up to 5 20-watt, 20-volt solar panels, and we're using the solar panels only give out about 17 volts, 18 volts at best on a sunny day in England. But what we did, we converted the solar power into a spinning radio frequency, like a spinning magnetic field, and we created particle flywheels which are combined of copper and aluminium, weighing in at 25 kilos in each drum. And we use the spinning magnetic field to spin up the copper and the aluminium, which allows us to spin the flywheel, or 25 kilos in each drum. We can spin up to 500,000 RPM in the magnetic field without worrying about the flywheel exploding. I'll see if I can pause it on there. Yeah. So we spin it up with no worries of the flywheel exploding, because any other type of flywheel, when you're getting up around some serious RPM, right, not good to be around. So we've got particle clutches and flywheels that we designed that we accelerate, and then we use the gyroscopic precession from that to transfer the energy from each one of the drums back to the central shaft. And what we found with this machine is that I have got other video I'll have to dig out, but at a later date we put wheels on it, and when you push the machine forwards, one end of it lifts up in the air, a bit like the Weight experiment where the whole machine will lift. So one of the things we were curious about then was, what if we started loading one end of it with bags of cement? So we put several 25 kilo bags of cement on the end of the machine, and again pushed it forwards, and it lifted the weight of the machine and the cement, which was interesting. So in the end, we got just short of about 1/2 a ton of cement stacked on one end of one of these, and was able to push the machine forwards with no effort, and the whole machine, using the precession within the system, causes it to lift up, and it lifts the weight of the cement. So this was one of our first machines that we built, and at present I have one of my colleagues with me on Skype on the phone, but we also use this to generate power as well. So this machine has got typically up to 1/4 megawatt output, and this one like this is going into India, to the Indian government, hence Malta in 6 weeks. And we've got another version of this going out to Senegal, to the United Nations, for power generation, but dumbed down versions of the machine. Now this actual piece of technology is key in our flight system, and I have a video where it's only a CAD one. We did a CGI of what we're actually building, but the whole of the craft, right away from the smart skin, the avionics systems, the propulsion systems, everything's been blueprinted. We have everything on DFX files for CNC and CAD machines to start building everything. And we've spent the last 7 years putting all that together. But there's if I close this one, there's a little fun video where the skin on our craft doesn't disappear like this. This was just to show the inside and the outside of the craft. But if I try and pull that, do that, maybe, there we go. That's just CGI of what we're actually building, but the the CAD guy that did it couldn't quite get the shape right, so we've had a bit of fun and games with that. But on the technology side, we were invited to the X Prize by Richard Branson with our avionics suite and what we achieved with the cockpit of this aircraft. But we didn't want to get involved because you have to disclose all your technology and what you're working on. We were in talks with Space Force and had several meetings with them and decided to walk away from what they're doing. So we've basically just kept everything in-house. So we got our investors, we've solved all the problems on what we need on the technology. If anyone's wondering how it stays like that above the ground, we use vector thrusting, and the regen offsets the rest of the weight, because we found that by spinning these particle flywheels up to 500,000 RPM in a radio frequency, and again on that video, the back of the craft has got some pretty serious capacitors that we prototyped and built. The whole of the craft skin is charged up with static. The skin itself is made up of a number of different 3D printed composites, which also work as hydrides. So we actually store hydrogen in the skin of the craft as well as part of our shielding. And another thing that we've been working on, we're working with a couple of other aerospace companies, not aerospace, sorry, well, yeah, I suppose you could call them aerospace, on radiation shielding for commercial aircraft that fly polar routes at the minute as well, with some of our shielding technology we developed. So I just thought that might be a bit of fun for everyone to see, and if anyone's got any questions on anything, I'll do my best to answer.
Rob, you mentioned that something was spinning at 500,000 RPM. Can you elaborate what was spinning at 500,000 RPM?
It can. We've not spun it up to that speed yet. We didn't dare do it in the garage. And we were working at a place in England in Lytham St Anne's outside of Blackpool, and we didn't want to chance cranking the power up too much there either, because we didn't own the building. But where we are on Malta, it doesn't matter if we blow the building up. Yeah, basically we're using a radio frequency, a spinning magnetic field, to spin copper and aluminium to create a spinning flywheel, because some of the earlier prototypes we built, we were cranking them up using steel flywheels, and we had some pretty dangerous situations, to say the least, with some of these.
So inside those little tumblers was a spinning flywheel in there, or are you talking about the tumbler spinning around as being the flywheel?
I know the actual, yeah, let me just put that up for you a minute. I won't play it, I'll just right. So in each one of the drums, we're creating a vortex, a magnetic vortex, and we're using the properties of the copper and aluminium to be able to spin that around in the vortex. And by doing that, we can create a really powerful gyroscope by spinning the copper and aluminium powder, which we can't do by just spinning a flywheel, because like the sort of, like we got 25 kilos in each one of them drums spinning. And in order to accelerate the whole machine up to the sort of power that we want and the energy we want, you can't do it with a flywheel. It's not safe. But when you spin the copper and the aluminium in, it's almost like in a donut in an enclosed system with our bipolar magnets set around it, and we play a frequency through it and spin the field. And when we do that, it allows us to spin the copper and the aluminium powder. It's like, becomes like diamagnetic, and it spins in the field, and we can accelerate it up really, really fast.
So aluminum copper powder that's spinning around inside of a toroidal magnetic field inside of the drum. And the drums themselves are also spinning around this device. And then when you push the device, it leans on one side and seems to lose some weight. Have you checked though, because like Eric Lathwaite did this type of work where he showed, hey, look, it's, you know, the gyroscope is hanging on just one pivot point. We know that gyroscopes can move their center of mass. Have you checked whether the entire device is losing any weight or creating any linear thrust with like a massive scale or something like that?
Well, when we were testing this, basically, we've not per se, we've had it on industrial scales and seen a difference, but when we were testing this, we had this set up in a way where we loaded one end of it up with cement. So with it acting like a whole series of gyroscopes set in precession, they all work, and they're all slightly offset from each other. They all work together to an overall precession and torque back to the central shaft, to the central core of the machine. So when we lift one end of the machine up, it'll sit there just like a gyroscope sits there. And what we found is when we add weight to the machine, it doesn't affect the machine's able to hold that weight.
Right, but the machine losing any weight? Is there any overall change in weight? Or is it just able to hold it with its center of mass being altered from the gyroscopic motion?
It holds it with, it's holding it with the center of mass, but the weight of the machine is roughly a ton, say 1.25 tons in weight. And that's what it'll weigh on the scales. And we can, when we push it forwards, there's a fluctuation up and down in weight on the scales. But then once it's sat, it sits back down at its weight of 1.25 tons, but the front end will be up in the air now. So it'll pivot like a gyroscope, will pivot on the back. But then when we add weight to the front end of it, the scale doesn't see that added weight. It's like the gyroscopic precession's holding the weight, but we're going to build another one of these out on Malta, a lot more better engineered. This one's reasonable, but we're going to build a better one on Malta. But
that you got 1,000 pounds or half a ton of weight loss by adding this extra weight and not seeing a difference in the scale, right?
Yeah. So when we put the back of the machine on the scale, and then we lifted the front of the machine up, the weight is still all on the back of the scale. It fluctuates for a few minutes. Like if you accelerate the machine up, then it'll lose weight as it accelerates. And then when you decelerate, it will gain weight. But we've got a lot of scope for acceleration, because what you see in here at the minute, we're only running this machine at about 5,000 RPM internally. The reason the drums spin is the end plates on the drums are machined aluminium, and we have it on silver steel drive shafts, and the spinning magnetic field is creating eddy currents in the clutch, and the eddy currents in the clutch, sorry, I'll say that again, the spinning magnetic field in the toroids is creating eddy currents in the aluminium end plates, and it's acting like a slip clutch. So what tends to happen is as the internal accelerates, the external drums start to like slip, drag and spin. So while that's happening, then the whole machine like picks up more and more speed, more and more energy, but we don't do it in the garage, and we don't do it in the like our facility in Lytham St Anne's outside of Blackpool. So we ended up setting the plan into motion to go out to Malta and work in a bigger facility out there.
Could you speak about Malta? Why did you choose Malta over somewhere else?
Hang on, I just need to. I'm just going to move my computer downstairs because I'm staying at a friend's house during this.
No, do you want me to leave your screen share up, Robert, or do you want me to take that down now, sir?
I can take it down.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I just have to speak a bit quieter because I'm stuck in this country at a friend's house during the, unfortunately. Yeah, so yeah, when the what the plan is we use vector thrusting to lift the weight of the craft, and the machine being connected to the shaft, the machine being connected at a crucial point of the centre of mass of the craft. We believe that the vector thrusting is only going to see the weight of the machine, and we'll be able to offset a lot of the weight of the craft as we accelerate the machine up. And then the other key point of the machine is the gravity assist drive, as we call it, the regen, is we can manipulate the RPM in different pods around the machine. So it becomes the guidance system for the craft. And we built a smaller one and put it into a radio controlled jet that we built, model jet, and used it for the control system to fly the jet with pretty outstanding results for maneuverability. You can almost turn on a dime. So by manipulating the precession in each drum through the helix that it runs through when it's the energy is flowing through it, it will allow us to change direction of the craft. The engines are another thing altogether, what we've got going on there, but that's not important really at the minute. It was just the gravity assist drive and what it does, but this only creates gravitational lift during acceleration. Deceleration, it starts to see the weight. So as we accelerate the spinning fields, it will not see the weight of the bags of cement. And then as you decelerate, then it starts to see the weight. So we believe by being able to accelerate this up to being able to spin a frequency at 500,000 RPM, it gives us a lot of scope to slowly and continuously accelerate the regen up, which will then allow us to offset the weight of the craft so we can take full potential of the thrust from the engines, and the vector thrusting from the craft will only ever have to offset the weight of the regen itself and not everything else on the craft.
You spoke also about a bipolar magnet that's being utilized inside those drums. Can you elaborate about this bipolar magnet?
Yeah, what we did was we were working with Nadium 52 and 52 magnets, and what we needed to do was we found a way of destabilizing the magnetic field on the quantum level where we can reprogram the field in the magnets. So generally you will take two south poles and try and push them together, and it's impossible to do. What we did is found a way to reprogram that, so when you push the two south poles together, they're basically like saying, no, we're not going to stick, and then all of a sudden there's a pulse and they stick together. And once you've done that, you can view that through a magnetic viewer or sprinkle iron filings over it. I think we have some pictures on our website of it, but you can sprinkle iron filings over a sheet of paper with the magnet underneath, and what it shows is jets coming out from each north pole on the magnet, and then it shows a disk, a magnetic field through the center of the magnet. So what we do with that is, where the two south poles are stuck in the middle, we put a wound coil around that, and then we can play a frequency into it and resonate that coil. And when we create a particular resonating magnetic field on that junction where the two souths are connected, the field then starts to oscillate. So the magnet tries to separate and then stick again, but without actually doing this, is happening internally. And when we do that, it allows us to really amplify the magnetic field. So we use that amplification then to create our spinning field within the toroids, which holds the aluminium powder and the copper powder.
Is the copper and aluminum powder spinning inside an atmosphere, or do you have a vacuum in there?
We're not a full vacuum, but as much as we can possibly get. What is it, about 98% you can get?
Well, it depends on your pump, but yeah, that was something I'm interested in, because at 500,000 RPM, you're going to be dealing with major forces pulling the materials out, and also the spinning. They must be spinning at almost relativistic speeds. Well, what's the diameter of the toroid?
Well, in that particular machine, the drums are roughly about 18 inches diameter. The toroid's going to be about 16-inch diameter.
So
with an internal cross-section diameter of 8-inch. Straight onto the shaft pretty much. And then all the magnetic assemblies are around that. But the magnetic fields hold the aluminium and copper in the core. And because it's diamagnetic, what happens with the bipolar, the diamagnetic field pushes back on the bipolar magnets, and then the bipolar magnets push back. So it's constantly, the field's constantly balancing itself out as you accelerate.
Well, very interesting. Why did you choose to work with Malta as opposed to anywhere else?
Of European Space Agency out there said they'd give us 10 million to get started there, and Malta's not got anything serious in the way of aerospace, so we said that we were interested to set up on there. And there's a lot of other reasons. We have a lot of contacts out there, and the airport ultimately doesn't mind us taking off from there.
So basically, you're going to become the Maltese space agency.
We did suggest that too, and we did say that we'd represent Malta and become like tachyonaerospace.gov. They're waiting for us to go out there and do this first part of. We've already been and had meetings with them over the last 3-4 years now, I think. So they're basically welcoming us with open arms. But we've just been getting our ducks in the row, and then like all this crazy stuff in the world happened at the minute, so we're getting ready to. Well, I'm actually going to sail over there. So, and my colleague who's on Skype with me now, he's out in the US. He's flying in from Texas to Malta, and we're meeting up with some of our other people there, and we're going to get things underway.
Oh, very nice. I'd love to meet up with you. I know we talked about coming to the US and all that.
Yeah. No, I'll be coming out there at the end of June. So when I come out, I'll definitely pop in and I'll bring you some of the magnets and that, and share some of the stuff with you, what we've been doing.
Yeah, definitely interested in checking out those magnets, because that is something that I'm very interested in.
Oh, I was going to say, I should jump in really quick too. Robert, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I should say, you know, because this is open discussion, if anybody else has anything also, you know, I don't want the audience to be shy. But again, Robert, I apologize for interrupting you there, sir.
This is a gravity alchemist, Bill. Yeah, you were talking about the time crystals. I mean, not time crystals, but time travel. I was just reading that John Archibald Wheeler, Richard Feynman's professor or confidant, whatever, calls up Richard Feynman and he says, you know, I've got this theory that there's only one electron in the universe and that it travels back and forth into time, because that's why all the electrons are symmetrically alike, and you can't tell the difference from the electron in an apple and electron that came from the other side of the universe. And so they talked about that. And one of the interesting things that the other speaker was saying was positrons hide out. He said that the positrons, well, where are the positrons that go with the electrons? He says, well, they're hiding out in the protons. And anyway, Richard Feynman got to thinking about that, and he came up with the integral path theory, theorem, or whatever it is. And that's how he came up with it. So I thought that was really interesting. And as far as this fellow's invention, I think that's really cool. Man, that just looks awesome. And to get those kind of I don't know how many radians. Well, I guess you would measure in radians. You'd measure it in RPMs, or like he said, 500,000 RPMs. That is amazing. I'd like to know the technology to do that, because that's what I'm working with, is spinning things.
Well, once we're set up out on Malta, any of you guys are welcome to come out and have a look at what we're doing, and we're happy to share what we're doing. You know what I mean? With like, because it's, for us, we always looked at ourselves as an aerospace company by the people for the people, and not being like one of these big corporations and ending up like a dinosaur. It's like we've put a lot of money into this ourselves, and we have emails from some of the top vice presidents and presidents of some of the biggest aerospace companies in the world, wishing us luck. We've spoke at aerospace conferences around the world and physics conferences, and NASA told us that if you're a month ahead of the game, you're investable. If you're 6 months ahead of the game, you're crazy. And if you're years ahead of the game, we won't touch you. And that's like what we've dealt with for 30 odd years now. And we've sort of built peripheral technology to make money. So our peripheral technologies raise money to put into this technology. So we've put a lot of time and work into it, but our main motto is by the people for the people, and technology isn't any good if you're a big corporation and you sat on it, it's like the idea is like just with the bits that we've got, we want to develop this, we want to share it, and we want to be able to, like that machine you've seen is capable of generating electric, and we have government reports that prove it does. And the colleague on the phone there on Skype with me, his name's Rick, out in Texas. He's taken it into the Indian government in 8 June. I'm out in the US in June, so probably the end of June, July, he'll be taking it over to India to the government. And we have another group working with the United Nations in Senegal in Africa to take the technology out there as well for electrical, like power generation.
Well, that's great. It sounds like you start on one thing, you developed the technology, it paid off, and then you moved on to this technology with it. It doesn't get much better than that. I hope that that I come across the technology as that I just stumble onto, because I'd rather be lucky than good. As Chuck Yeager used to say when he was test pilot for jets, he always would say, I'd rather be lucky than good. But it sounds like you're onto something there. I hope the best for you.
Hey, Robert, this is Clay. Could you speak to a little bit to the skin of the craft? I understand sensors in the skin and all that, but could you speak to that? Is that composite, and how do you deal with temperatures and whatnot? And then likewise, or additionally, the propulsion. I mean, it appears that there's engines as well, and I think I saw like some kind of plasma containment device as well. I was wondering if you could just touch really quickly on any of that.
Yeah, okay. Right, so the skin on the craft is we've been working with ABB that do all the robotics, and we've been designing you'd probably laugh at this, but we've been designing a 3D printer which will operate 100 feet by 50 feet by 40 feet to 3D print the craft. But it's got to be done that way because we're printing another company we met at one of the aerospace conferences, I think out in Macedonia with NASA and Airbus. We hooked up with a company which is doing work with these micro powders for 3D laser sintering and printing. So what we've done is we've come up with a series of materials and composites that we can print together along with hydrides into the skin. So the skin itself will be about 3-4 inches thick, but extremely light, but also it's a hydride, so we can store hydrogen in the skin. Hydrogen's like really good for background radiation and what have you. Also, the cockpits in the craft are configured as 3 separate spheres, and one of the central sphere actually is held magnetically, but also floats in a polar solution. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff goes on with that, but on the actual skin of the craft, we have embedded crystal transducers. And what we found with the bipolar magnets is that we can use them, simple terms like a microphone almost, so we can read the resonant frequency of, say, heat. One of the experiments we did in the lab was took an aluminium block. We put one of our bipolar transducers onto the block, and we're able to heat the block up with a Bunsen burner, and anything that heats up has a frequency signature. So what we found is that we tried to record that signature and electronically transfer it through cables to another transducer on another block of aluminium across the lab and resonate that, and nothing happened. So then we ended up figuring out that if we use the bipolar jet and use that as the signal to the other transducer and the other magnet, as we heat one block up, what happens is the bipolar jet allows you to send that frequency into the second block, so the second block heats up equally. So we ended up with one block glowing red hot that's being heated with a Bunsen burner, and then the second block glows red hot, but that's being heated up by the resonant frequency in the bipolar jet into the second transducer. So I suppose that's probably not really much different than ultrasonic welding or something, but we've got the skin configured with these transducers where when there's an amount of heat building up on the craft, we can actually transmit that heat away to the back of the craft, away from the craft. So that was something that we worked on. And we also did a lot of work with the frequency of the skin, where we tried this in water on a surfboard, and also in some pumps that we developed, where we can we by manipulating the frequency in the magnetic frequency in cavities, and by allowing hydrogen to leak into the cavity, we can create these pressure, like a pressure wave, like barrier, like these little mini pressure waves all over the hull of a craft. So as the craft is traveling through the atmosphere, and it's only really relevant in the atmosphere, but as it travels through the atmosphere, these little cavities are resonating and create little pressure waves using the hydrogen gas as a carrier, and that allows for the craft to almost like, or it will allow for it to almost slipstream. But again, some of that's still experimental, and we're still working on it.
Is that an external combustion thing as well, or?
It isn't. It isn't. We found that so what we did with this, we basically tried it on a surfboard in the water, and we tried it in a pump. We did build another peripheral technology, which was a hydro plant that's in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, but it's not very difficult to manipulate, say, the way water moves in a pipe by reprogramming the nature of the water and the frequency of the pipe, so you can create almost a frictionless flow through a system. So we looked at the same thing with airflow and friction, where we can measure the frequency of the airflow hitting the skin of the craft, and then what we do is we basically match that frequency in the cavities with pressure waves, almost like you could say little micro detonations almost, but we match that. And then what we do then is we knock it out of phase with the bipolar field, the frequency. And when you knock it out of phase, the air just seems to, and everything else just seems to slipstream over it. It's like the craft becomes separate from the outside atmosphere, or the effects of the outside atmosphere.
Almost like cavitation, but not.
Yeah, yes, yeah, like cavitational waves, but not cavitational. But the skin on the craft's designed in such a way that these little hexagonal transducers that we've got embedded, we can use some of the heat that we're transferring to release hydrogen through the core of each hexagon, and each one's got a dimple in it, and then the heat causes that, I suppose you could say it's like pop, and that them cavity waves that it creates create a frequency, and the faster the airflow over the skin, the faster the frequency changes on the craft or matches it. And then using the bipolar magnets, we're able to like push back and knock it out of phase, and then it creates like an out of phase frequency of pressure wave frequency around the craft, which then allows it to push through the atmosphere. But we're not, to be honest with you, we're not really worried about flying through the atmosphere at any sort of high rate of knots. It's more about like once you're out in space.
Well, guys, let me jump in real quick. We've got about 10 minutes here, and I'll let it go after we reach 6, and you guys can just talk for as long as you like. But just a friendly reminder to, for anybody who is able to turn their camera on, please turn your camera on. And during the main part of the session, right, when we have speakers and Q&A sessions, we require that the camera be on for everybody. And that's just to make things more friendly so that people can kind of see you while you communicate and stuff. Robert, I wasn't going to pester you for it because I know it's like 1 a.m. your time now. So I know it's massively late for you, but it's just kind of a reminder, this time of the day, most folks turn their cameras off anyways, but it is nice to have them on, especially for YouTube. Also, we record these for posterity to help educate people. And so that way people can kind of get a better feel for who everybody is and what you're presenting on. So, but again, Robert, I wasn't singling you out. I just, in general, thought I would do a friendly reminder.
Well, okay. I've looked a little bit at boundary layers on skins, and I've heard, like I'm not directly involved with it, but some of the torpedoes and things they actually suck themselves through the water that way. They actually draw the water around them through some kind of magnetohydro system, and they can travel at incredible speeds, and there's no cavitation. As a matter of fact, there's not even a wake. Has anybody, it sounds sort of like a type of MHD system that you're talking about on your craft, which, that makes a lot of sense. I would like to know more about that technology, if anybody has any input.
Yeah, what we'll do is we're moving forwards on Malta, we'll start releasing every few weeks. We'll release some of the paperwork with all the blueprints and stuff in it, so like everybody can, because it's an absolute bet that amongst all the guys in this group that someone's going to come up with something absolutely awesome. It's, collaboration's the key.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about that. I've like Tesla talked about MHD on his aircraft, his saucer, and his idea what gravity was, the dynamic gravity, and then Einstein's gravity, and then we've got Newton's gravity. Everybody's got their take on it, and it seems to me that the Tesla, he said he finished his gravity theory, but then he never published it and never printed it out. But it sounded like a Tesla kind of MHD system.
We
But you
we
can't elaborate. Mhm.
we don't believe that what we've got is anti-gravity. We just think it's like gravity assist,
Okay.
because we've not been able to lose the weight of the whole machine. The machine's still there, but
Okay.
it seems to assist with gravity. That's
Okay.
all. But we have got some ideas on what we believe gravity is, and it's a tough one.
Yeah, if we knew that, we'd be having this conference on the moon or something. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.